Eric, it's been some time since I've addressed publicly our competitors in the podcast space. Do you mind if I just issue a statement that I think would neatly encapsulate how we feel about them?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, in the health and fitness space, all I would say is that you think you're close, but you have no idea.
Yeah, I think the words of the great Taylor Atwood are apropos in this specific circumstance, my friend. And we understand what it is to be competitive. And we understand what it is for others to think they're actually competing with us when they don't realize that we're on a whole nother level. And not naming any names.
No
And we
names.
aren't going to, let's say, write any checks with our mouths that our asses can't cash.
Yeah.
The check's been written. Actually, I haven't written a check in probably over a decade, but the proverbial check has been written and it has been cashed.
Yeah.
And if you think it hasn't, then you need to check our bank account. All right. And if you're saying, what the hell is Eric talking about? What we're talking about is competitiveness, because today we have on the number 1 and number 2 2021 105 Open national competitors, Ashton Rouska, our new national champion, and Bryce Lewis once again on the podcast to specifically have a candid conversation about how to manage the pressures and potential benefits and downsides of one's competitive nature. And they had a really interesting conversation after the smoke had cleared, once the last deadlift was pulled in the 105 class about this, and having debriefed with Bryce after nationals, him sharing that conversation with me, my first thought was, oh man, we got to get that out to the people because a lot of people can benefit from it. And the boys did not disappoint.
No, Eric, this is a monster episode. It doesn't matter if you're into powerlifting. It doesn't matter if you consider yourself competitive or not competitive. I think just the genuine level of insight, self-awareness that allows them to be this introspective and to contemplate, why they do the things they do, how they view one another, their interaction with social media, which we can all relate to, their future goals, aspirations, everything there in between. Also, talking outside of lifting, how that influences them, their career choices, and everything else. Man, they go everywhere and anywhere, truly, with this episode. And so our ability just to kind of be a fly on the wall, you also leading the conversation and giving more insights when we delve into the psychology and so forth. I think it's one of the episodes where there's something for everyone. If you're listening, because you listen to every single Iron Culture episode, you're like, I wonder if this one's for me. This is one of those. It's specific but oddly applicable, therefore, to everyone else.
Yeah, it's perfect timing too, folks. We're just on the back of the 2021 USAPL National Championships, which had a lot more, I think, poignancy because the 2020 ones did not happen, which is also discussed in this episode. So this is just one of a number of fantastic episodes that's coming up where we're going to be talking to people who are in the mix of that. If you want to really get a look behind the curtains at arguably the most competitive powerlifting competition on the tested side of the sport, this is just the first of many. But this one's a really unique one where we're not just recapping what happened, but we're really talking about the energy, the mindset, and the dual nature of competitiveness that went into this episode. And I really appreciate both Ashton and Bryce for being so candid and being so open and authentic on this episode. It's a true honor that Iron Culture got to create a space for that. And it'll probably be no surprise to you with Bryce, if anyone has followed him in his prior conversations. He's been I'd say a champion for athlete mental health and promoting sports psychology in the powerlifting space. And you will also not be surprised to find out that Ashton is actually a graduate student studying psychology and neuroscience in his role with the U.S. Army, doing his PhD. So just some really eloquent, intelligent, thoughtful, and open-hearted individuals on this podcast, and it was an honor to have them on.
Eric, this is going to be an uncomfortable episode for me.
I think most episodes are uncomfortable for you.
Because we're so far apart. This is another reason, though, Eric. And that is,
okay.
As we know, we all have the sorting hat that we put on in this thing we call life. And clearly, I'm a House Slytherin. And I'm someone that is a win at any cost, right? I don't believe in valuing the competition, their feelings, their perform or anything. And I don't even believe in playing fairly, right? It's just a win is a win is a win. Is kind of what I say to myself. If I was to be a Sith apprentice, my name would be Darth Lucas, after my main inspiration, George Lucas. So I just this whole thing about talking about competition and trying to have bridges of understanding and have the subtle interplay of what it means to be competitive while also having a healthy respect for adversaries or your fellow competitors, it might just go whoosh.
Well, I know we had a conversation when I was in Sacramento in 2019 for my show, where you took me to your car after I won.
I did.
And you said, I'm really glad that you won because I didn't have to do this, open the trunk. And you showed me a crowbar signed by Tanya Harding. And I said, close the trunk, Omar.
Tell no one this.
And we need to have a discussion. And I felt like that discussion was one of our least productive. I kind of felt like everything I said was not taken in by you. And you kept giving me the wink like, I gotcha. Yes. May the best person win. To be fair, wink.
Eric, to be fair, you were very distracting with your physique. So if you're expecting me, you won the 2019,
Maybe that's why you were winking at me. You
right.
You weren't really looking
picking
at me
up anything I was doing.
It now. Yeah. Right. So I figured, since that really just didn't seem to sink in, that maybe we could bring on two true champions. We have the USAPL National 105 kilo champ, Ashton Rouska, on. Welcome to the podcast for the first time, my friend.
Hey, it's good to be on. Thanks for having me.
It's a true pleasure. And then we have just a pathetic human who lost, who I am firing as a client, either after this podcast or at least after it comes out, so you don't say anything negative before it. No, in all seriousness, we have my close friend, multi-time national champion, world champion 105 kilo lifter, Bryce Lewis. Both of you gentlemen totaled over the current official world record total with your totals in a tight battle that went down to the last deadlifts. You guys clashed as titans once again, just like you did in 2019, but this time the tables were turned. It is an exciting thing to watch. I had at least 2 heart attacks during that session, which I was watching at 3 a.m. from here in New Zealand. Bryce Lewis, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's good to be back.
But what people think the show is about, talking about that battle, that 7 for 9 day on both of you, the calls, the deadlifts that were the knees locked out, didn't matter in the end, did it, Ashton? You came out on top. The drama, we're not going to talk about that, folks. What we're going to talk about is the touching moment afterwards that came when Bryce, you shared with me in our little debrief that you and Ashton had a conversation about competitiveness and you were genuinely curious about how does one manage the potential stresses, influences that you might see on social media, the emotions that someone who is trying to be competitive at the highest level might have, to be able to perform on the platform. And I would just love, and I know Omar would as well, to be a fly on the wall to understand what goes through athletes like yourselves' heads in the lead up to a competition and on game day.
Yeah, so it took me a while to kind of like get out of just reacting to stuff and thinking like, hey, why am I feeling this way? So like you scroll through Instagram as you do 700 times a day or whatever the person is doing, and there's a lot of strong people putting up a lot of strong lifts. It doesn't have to be our weight class. It can be 93s, it can be 120s, and every one of those posts you see is an opportunity to compare your performance in that moment to whatever you see. And maybe you don't compare where you are right now. Maybe you compare your worst to their best, which is something I've certainly done before, or you compare where you are now to their best. And like every time you see that, you kind of have to, you have some emotional reaction, and maybe you have some kind of a brain process, kind of some rationalization that happens after the fact. So for me, I'll speak from my own personal experience. I see guys like Ashton, put up some like light squat day for you is like 675 for fives or something like that. I'm like, okay, that's a heavy squat day for me. I feel bad about myself now. Like I have to Because powerlifting is so comparable with these numbers, like it's so easy to compare these things. And I find myself kind of like, ignoring Ashton, like as nice of a guy as you are, you're sending me like, hey, I hope your day is good, and I'm like, you're the enemy. I just kind of have to like turn you into the enemy. So I talked a little bit about that. And I wondered from the other side, as Ashton is looking around at competitors, what does he think? And this was kind of the start of our conversation there. So, maybe you can share, Ashton, how you process some of this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, you put it eloquently. I mean, every time you see other people train and throw up ridiculous numbers and everything else, it is, a good chance for you to compare yourself to them, and especially if you're directly competing with them. I mean, you throw up stories and like half the plates are cut out and the weight's moving good. I'm like, he's strong and he wants it and he's ready. And if I'm not strong or if I don't show up, he's gonna have it. It's gonna be him. And I think we all sort of process that differently. I know for me personally, I guess the way that I have been sort of with, watching others lift in competition over the years has been maybe a little unique, maybe not. But I mean, I feel that when I watch others and I get the feeling that, they're either nipping on my heels or I'm trying to nip on their heels. Something about it just pushes me to try to like be better and to do more. And I've noticed this trend over the last few years from like my win in 17 to this year, 2021, particularly through 17 through 20 though, like each year, and I've talked about this before, each year, and there's a reason I'm mentioning all this, each year, like my total increased, but each year the increase in the total actually increased as well. So like not only was there an upward trajectory each year, but each year I was getting better. Like I was getting better at getting better. And I was, trying to figure out, like what's the common denominator here? I've been lifting for a long time. And this progression like seems a little like funny to me. Not like, super out of the ordinary, like or in a super short time span, because it's still over a period of like 3-4 years, but nonetheless still like, I would say like relatively impressive, especially at the level we're competing at. And the common denominator is each year it just seems like there's someone out there that just pushes me to literally give it everything that I have, every ounce of strength and being that I have. And for me, it's like extraordinarily motivating. So I actually am like the opposite almost. I enjoy watching people really just put up ridiculous numbers and just, be crazy strong and be their best selves, and because it just like, it forces me to do more. And then when I start doing more, I just get stronger. And then each year I've gotten better at getting stronger, especially these last few years. So I don't know, like it was almost like sort of like the opposite effect. And of course, on your end, it was a lot different. And of course, I don't take it personally, I know some people are weird, about like those kinds of things, like, oh, well, like he's not, saying anything to me or whatever else. But I mean, on my end, I was like, this guy's really trying to focus and bring, his best package with like what he's working with right now. And, I like understand that. So I'm like, I just want to see him come in and like really throw up like what he can. And we'll see, who's the better, the better lifter on the day, And the fact that you came up after the meet also, I really appreciated and respected as well. And it's guys like you, Bryce, that forced me to continue to just get so much better than I ever thought I could be. So I don't know. Yeah. For me, there's almost like a positive effect of like watching guys like you and many others in the past that were, so far ahead of me. And then I finally like eventually would catch up.
It sounds like every one of those little posts is kind of like a little bit of fire for your motivation. You're just kind of stoking that fire a little bit at a time. Is that kind of how it is? Because I think you said that I asked you, like, what do you think about during training? Because like sometimes I think about like Ashton and what he's lifting and like, is he thinking about me? Like, are we just, in different states thinking about each other while training?
Hey.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I've thought about you. I've thought about Davis. I've thought about, Amendola, like all you guys, because you're all, just phenomenal lifters. And I know that if I go into that session and I don't treat it how I should, I don't like respect the weight, you know, and everything else, if I don't show or render the proper respect to my competition, then I'm just not going to, I just feel like I'm not going to give as much as I should be giving. So a part of me, I think, actually kind of needs that and craves that that extrinsic motivation from watching you guys.
Yeah.
You know, Bryce and Ashton, something that we've really benefited from, myself and Omar, is getting the opportunity to host some amazing lifters. And I just find it so interesting, the diversity of relationships with competitiveness that we've had. And you guys are different, and you're also different from other people. I think it really comes down to, how do you make competitiveness facilitative to your own performance? And to talk about how some people really love competition, shout out to King of the Lifts. They just had Russell Orhe, and congratulations on opening your gym, by the way. And we had Russ on once, and you know, his background, he's a very competitive dude. He's, you know, played in team sports, and I think that always brings a slightly different flavor to when then you convert to individual sport. But Russ was sharing how while he was training, he was playing Johnny Candido's videos where they were predicting him not to be the winner. And to me, that is almost comical in how much one is like psyching themselves up and creating that kind of, I would say, not true, but kind of some degree of animosity towards your opponents. And he seems like he cultivates his own like drive in that way. Like I think that's such an interesting thing, because some people need to control that, or it gets in their head and they can't manage their arousal levels, while other people just seem to feed off it. And I just find that so interesting, how people are different. So yeah, just as a little side comment as I was thinking about that, because we've had a slightly different perspective from, also, like, again, like when we had Ellis McLean and Taylor Atwood on, they're highly competitive. And then we had Evie Corrigan on, and she has had to try to focus more inwardly to perform at the high level that she has. So it's just very interesting how you can get people on polar opposite ends of the spectrum, but who are top of the game. So anyway, a little side comment for me. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, it certainly happens.
That's that Michael Jordan where he's like, and I took that personally, and he just makes everyone into the enemy as fuel for his fire to be a better athlete.
Yes, anyone who hasn't seen that documentary, the number of times where Jordan makes it personal in his interviews is almost, again, comical in my opinion. But it's Michael Jordan. Like, you just can't deny that must have been something in the mix for what enabled him to be, the greatest basketball player, at least in his era, and maybe others as well. Although I know everyone who loves LeBron would probably argue with me on that. But anyway, back to you, Bryce.
Well, yeah, I've gotten to a few points in this journey where like I just realized that I can actually talk about this with other people, rather than kind of keep this stuff bottled inside. There was one time where I was trying to speculate on whether or not Jesse Norris was competing at nationals, and I was like, let me just ask him. And it just kind of seems obvious. And this time I'm like, man, I have all these like thoughts about Ashton, and like it's driving me crazy. Well, let me just have a conversation with him. And I think a lot of people are probably pretty receptive to that. It just doesn't happen very often. And it takes someone who's willing to chat about this kind of stuff, and someone who can ask questions and be comfortable kind of putting themselves out there. But it's helped me process a little bit about how to view competitiveness. Like I felt a lot of pressure going into the competition, and I had to kind of do some journaling and ask myself, like, where is this stuff coming from? Why do I feel this kind of heightened state where every one of these posts of just someone's training, it just feels like this kind of attack on me, and like it shouldn't be feeling that way. They're just doing their own thing and putting their stuff out there. Like, why does it feel this way to me? So it was interesting kind of diving into that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it's not, I mean, and it's not like I can't relate to how you feel like 0%, I mean, certainly like watching, there is, I think, something, for most people about watching your direct competition, do, just really like magnificent things. And you're just like, damn, like when you put up the mock meet that one time, which, I mean, it like, I was like, damn. I was like, I really have to get better or I'm not going to be able to win this. And I mean, it was so funny, like even going into nationals, so make no mistake, like I was confident in my, like my own abilities and my own strength, um, but I know some people or a lot of folks actually like, pegged me as like, they were doing those whole like comparison things. They're like, oh, Ashton's our favorite to win. And then I would see a lot of people, oh no, it's Bryce, he's taking it home, and stuff like that. But, like for some reason for me deep down, like, especially, after like 19, where I thought, that I like, would have won that one and I didn't. I was like, I don't know. I don't feel like the favorite right now. I feel like, I'm the one like, coming back and trying to, prove to myself, that I can, that I can pull this off. I mean, Bryce is like a seasoned, competitor, and watching him train, and watching him do, just so many, just watching him do what he does. And sometimes it just looks like flawless, and I mean, I know we don't see everything under the surface, and, there's a lot of, adversity and struggle that I think most people, especially going into this nationals, had to face, it is like, I don't want to say intimidating because it does force me to be better, but it is like, man, if I don't show up, it's going to be the same thing that happened in 2019. So I have to really give it everything, and I can't shortchange anything. I can't leave any stone unturned. And despite, there being a lot of circumstances before the meet, I think probably for both of us that were out of our control, just sort of controlling everything that we can, accepting what we can't, and, really just leaving it all out there best that we can.
Yeah.
It's critical.
I want to ask you about confidence because I feel like it's kind of related here. Like these posts, all right. So in my head, you kind of have like this reserve of confidence, some amount, and various things can add to that and various things can subtract from that. But it's like, it's this precious resource to protect. And, if you miss too many lifts in training, it reduces confidence. If you make a whole bunch of lifts sequentially, like that kind of adds confidence. And then, seeing these various posts can either add or subtract depending on how you do. But like, it always boils down to these stories we tell ourselves, like maybe part of your story, Ashton, was like, I feel like I'm the underdog. I feel like I have to try really hard. I have a really big squat, and that's part of my formula for success, which by the way, 800 is absolutely insane. So congratulations on that. But like, I think the stories we tell ourselves is such a key component of this kind of thing. And when I, at least speaking from my own personal experience, when I see various posts, you kind of have to think, oh yeah, well, I'm the guy who performs in competition, or training is different from competition, or essentially you take these things and you reinterpret them in a way that doesn't feel as damaging. Like it's almost defensive, almost.
Right. You rationalize these factors in a way that will boost your confidence rather than hopefully deteriorate it or degrade it.
Absolutely. We're talking about facilitative narration and rationalizing of the situation. And it's interesting because you each individually have a story of your own performance, strengths, weaknesses. And then because of social media, there is an external one that is somewhat related to your own perception that gets layered on top of it. So for example, the common narrative that you'll see in discussions of what was going to happen in the 105 is, well, Ashton might have more brute strength, but Bryce, he's Mr. Consistency. So Ashton's got to go 9 for 9. And like, if he misses, then Bryce might win. And it's interesting that what you were saying, Bryce, is it was actually similar to that. So you not only have to manage your own emotions and what you're seeing, but then you also have to take in this input that is coming from the various podcasts, the various posts, YouTube videos, etc. And I often reflect and I think, man, I don't think that, and no disrespect to any champs who are, around pre-social media, but I don't think they had the same kind of pressure that exists now, or at least the consistency of that pressure, which I think is something that is commendable for anyone who can get on the game day platform and not just puke on themselves, walk out, and go 0 for 9.
Yeah, and yeah, there is truly a different layer to that. I mean, just with social media in general, like everything is just so in your face, all the time. And if you don't like notifications, you just leave everything on, you let it all run as it should. You see a lot of people talk, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say. And sometimes it might bother you a bit. Sometimes you can overlook it. I mean, I know for me, generally for the meet, there were plenty of people betting for me, but I saw plenty of people, also betting against me, and for good reason. I mean, Bryce is a consistent performer, and he did win. He did beat me in 2019. And by like a significant margin too. So, I mean, I know I take like massive like jumps with attempts and stuff, and that's a whole strategy, that like I can go into. But I mean, like, and to some degree, like they were right. So it's like, damn, they are right. But at the same point in time, I'm like, well, things are different now than they were then, and I think that also like having a coach this time around was definitely helpful. As my sort of like responsibilities and duties outside of like the lifting realm have really mounted up recently in the past couple of years, it's been better to have that become more manageable with a coach. And I think that on game day, just being able to focus less on what others were doing and more on just doing whatever he put on to the bar each attempt also made things a lot better. Fun fact, I actually thought that when I got 2 reds for that last deadlift that I lost because I wasn't keeping track of the meet. So I was like, what? I was like, we need to contest this. Like, I thought it was a good lift. What happened? And then, Marcellus was like, hey, like, it's cool. I was like, oh. And then, someone came up to me. They were like, congratulations. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I didn't know at the time. And I was like, oh, okay. But even so, I mean, all that, giant rant, but all that to say, everything is in your face. You see what everyone's saying now, and a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, and some people don't. Well, a lot of people, I guess what helps me, kind of get over what a lot of people are saying is they don't really understand like me, or they don't understand my situation or what I do outside of lifting because I don't really talk much about it. So, I let people think what they think, and then at the end of the day, I just tell myself, hey, you're going to go in, and the cards are going to land where they fall regardless of what anyone says. So go in, give it your best, and give it everything. If you win, great. And if you lose, well, I would, render the proper respect to the champion, and I would have pride in the fact that I went in and gave it everything I had regardless. So for me, like winning or losing.
I went in with kind of this same attitude of like, if you are able to just put it all out there and you try your absolute hardest, like there's nothing more that you could have given. And if Ashton was the better lifter on the day, then he's the better lifter on the day. And congratulate him for being able to put up a bigger total, for putting more pounds in the bar. I also wanted to say, Ashton, that I thought that I lost when I missed my last deadlift in 2019. So we have that going for us.
Oh, wow. It's like they're striking, like, despite like, 2 totally different, just like sort of like cognitive like appraisals of like, competition and others and approaches. There are like some very striking, similarities and parallels like that are kind of arising in this conversation that are surprising to me. But it is very, very interesting to hear. And it's kind of cool to see that, regardless of sort of what your orientation is like going into a meet, that, we're all kind of faced with the same thing at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a couple things I want to touch on that you brought up, Ashton. I think one, and I'm gonna date myself a little bit, but I don't know if you guys remember The Wire. It was probably one of the fantastic show that kind of spurred, in my opinion, the era of really good long form TV shows. And I think in the very last season, there was, because they give multiple angles of basically the economy of selling drugs in Baltimore. There was the new head of the drug dealers, and his lieutenants were all protecting him from the fact that there was someone out in the streets saying his name, taking shots at him, because they knew if he knew that his name was out there, he would go do something stupid that would threaten the business. And that is a very pre-social media concept, that you could actually be shielded from the things that people are saying about you. And that was a strategy, a purposeful strategy that they had to do to protect him from. And when he finds out, he goes, "They said my name?" And he's just like, it is this like unholy thing in the street code for them to be in the street saying his name. And he had to respond. And you just can't have that mentality today, or you find yourself never getting to train and always angrily smashing your thumbs into your phone these days because someone says you're not natty. Someone says you didn't earn it. Someone says that you didn't get that lift. Someone says something at all times, and you can feed into all of it, and you can't respond to all of it, and you don't even know who's saying it. It's like, some random screen name with a fake picture half the time. So it might even be a bot, if we're going to get into politics. So it's this kind of very, very different reality to where the current world status requires different strategies for how you manage that. So that's one thing I think we could talk about is how do you manage social media in a way that's facilitative. The second thing you brought up is how you've been working with Marcellus, the Swole Fesser. Big shout out. He's by the way, he's done a fantastic job. Everyone he's been coaching, great series of athletes, and people only have good things to say about him. So big shout out to him. Lots of respect. So having a coach, I would like to think, Bryce, that has been helpful to you as well, but I won't answer that question for you. Now you have to say yes, so there's my insecurity going into the conversation. So yeah, getting external support, finding a way to manage social media. I think those are two things that probably there's a lot of gold to be dug. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially just in the modern climate of competition. Yeah, I think those are things really that. Well, I mean, the second one are arguably before the social media area, or you could argue still it's very important. But that first thing, especially just since social media has just taken off, yeah, like I think managing that as well as managing like managing the flux and like your expectations, like when people do say a lot of things, I mean, I think that it affects all of us to like a different degree. And I kind of mentioned some, basically like strategies of like conceptualizing it and managing it. But it's like, what if it is like difficult to manage that, or what if it doesn't start to interfere with your training and and it affects and negatively like affects like your performance? Then at some point it's like, well, like if this is very difficult for me to manage, then cut it off so I can perform the like the best possible put up the best possible performance that I can, given like the circumstances. And I think that, that is kind of like a new and novel thing, and it's becoming more and more relevant, especially in the last like very recent years. I think that, even like talking with like a coach about that or something, or someone else, a trusted confidant, or what have you, like about just like sort of, strategies of, managing that, I think is particularly important, especially, I mean, for instance, in Bryce's case, Bryce, you've been, competing and lifting and doing this for, a very long time. And I've also been lifting for a very, relative to my younger age, like a long time as well. And, it's like, then it was a lot different managing that than it is now, so there is like a big sort of, paradigm shift that we sort of have gotten to witness. And, I don't know, it's fascinating.
I was taking a little bit of a note about something I wanted to say is back when I was doing some research on mental toughness, there was this conversational study where they bring a bunch of Olympians and their coaches together and say, what do you guys think mental toughness is? And kind of come up with this agreed upon list of like these 12 definitions. And the one that struck out most to me was that athletes high in mental toughness have this unshakable self-belief that they have unique qualities that make them better than other athletes. So whatever happens, what other people do, you have these qualities that you think about yourself that you can always fall back on. Like, this is my ace up my sleeve. Like, this is the thing that separates me from other people, and I'll always have this. And I think in terms of talking about like this strategy of social media and kind of how to respond to some of this stuff, I think a lot of people turn to this kind of thing like, yeah, other people are throwing out these numbers, but, I do this, or, when it comes time to the day, I have this, whatever that unshakable self-belief is, that core of, it doesn't matter what other people are doing. That's kind of what you can fall back on. It was interesting to see that as such a pervasive theme across all these Olympians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's basically the anchor in the storm, right? It's to say like I have a truth that is independent from whatever I may encounter on this very unpredictable kind of turbulent sea of opinions and judgments of me. And I think there's probably a lesson there for self-acceptance, life, compassion, and a few other things, as far as just making it through the world, regardless of whether you're a competitive powerlifter. But that's really interesting, Bryce.
Yeah. So I was doing this journaling maybe a few days before I left for Daytona, and I wrote a little bit about how to feel about Ashton and other lifters. So Ashton, I'm going to read that now.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, I said, it's okay if other people are strong. I just want to be stronger on the day of competition. So these are kind of like these little affirmations I'm telling myself. Mm-hmm. Competitions are only possible with competitors. Competitors are people with their own training, their own narratives, their own desires to win, their own stories. They're allowed to have these, as I value my own story more, my own journey more. Because of this, it's okay to dislike Ashton as a lifter and to think that I'm superior, not you as a person, just, your total. Yeah. That belief in my superiority needs to be a consistent thread that carries me to apply effort through to the very last moment. It's the only way. Their strength doesn't reduce my strength, even though it sometimes feels that way. So just kind of wrapping my head around, seeing our entire weight class and being okay with that, and just kind of sitting in my body and being like, look, they can't affect what I put on the barbell. Only I can affect that. And they've got their own stories, and I've got my own story, and we're both going to try as hard on the day of competition. And it was freeing to kind of write some of this stuff. And like, I feel like I was able to better apply myself the day of competition. Whatever the outcome, I just felt like I was a little bit more in control and a little bit less of a head case.
There it is, control, right? That's what I mostly got from it, from listening to what you were saying. I was like, he's not just like, reasserting, his confidence, in his own ability and, in his own story, but he's also regaining, like some sense of, control over what he's capable of doing, regardless of what others are capable of doing. And, and in your shoes, that's, I think in anyone's shoes, really, actually, you could argue like that's a very important aspect of being able to perform when it's time to perform, having at least, some sense of control, knowing like, hey, like, it depends from lifter to lifter, but in your case, hey, like, yes, I am a consistent lifter. And, yes, I do, over, my expertise, my own strength level, my training, my history of competition, etc. If all the variables are taken into account, I do view myself as like the superior lifter to like my competition. And I do see myself, as like better, like in like the lifting sense. And there is no reason that I can't win, So I think it's really for you. I think it was a useful tool, like to actually like write that out and kind of like have that, to look at, to read, to mull over. For me, personally, I did a whole lot less writing, and most of it was just like in my training posts and stuff. It's like how I really feel is like sprinkled in there sometimes if you like read it. But for me, I would mostly just when it came to affirmations, like I use like affirmations too, of course. But I mostly, I guess I didn't really like write it out or have a journal for it, but I just kind of keep it all here, I suppose you could say.
Yeah. When it comes to like competitiveness and that thing that like competitions are only possible with competitors, like you don't want people to get hurt, and you don't like. It doesn't make sense to just be the only competitor out there, because an easy win isn't a worthy win. Like just steamrolling over competitions, that maybe that feels good to some people, but it's a whole different thing when you win against really good competition. When you try and you're up against stiff resistance and you come out on top. Whether we're talking team sports, individual sports, a video game, a hard video game, it's the same thing. It's
right.
Difficulty. Where am I going with this? Yeah,
I was just going to say, Bryce, you obviously haven't been to enough amateur natural bodybuilding competitions, because I say that's the lifeblood of the sport, is trying to find the division that no one else is in. I'm in the novice physique tall masters 1 division, and I'm the champion. Who else is in it? I'm the champion. All right, that's what matters. And then you could put it in your email signature and you feel fantastic. So I'm just saying, don't take shots at the best sport on the planet, natural bodybuilding. 100 federations strong, 1 competitor per federation per division. That's what we're going to go for in the future. But I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, lesson learned. I apologize.
No, but what you just said, Bryce, it definitely strikes a chord with me. The whole reason why I moved up to the 105 weight class wasn't just because I wanted to get all, just like bigger or heavier or anything. The sole reason that I moved up was because I felt that I wasn't going to be getting out of 93 what I was looking for. I felt like I wasn't going to get the competition that I was looking for. I felt like it was going to be sort of like a steamroll win. And that's no offense to the 93s. They put up, hella performances, especially Jonathan Keiko, and then Gavin as well, my friend from Jersey, just phenomenal performances. But for me, one, I don't fill out 105s, like, if being realistic. And I intentionally do that, so I give myself the space and room over years to grow. But also, it wouldn't have been very difficult for me to go back down to 205. My weight fluctuates like fairly big. I could have made 205, it wouldn't have been, like a significant hit on my performance. I mean, I've done this before, but I wasn't going to get the same thing out of it. I wasn't going to get the competition that I was looking for. And to me, it just would not have been the same. One of the wins that I cherish the most, besides the recent one, is like when I won the 2017 Open, 205. I won, on body weight. And those are always the most salient, memories for me, like from my, just from my competitive memories in general. The ones where I just give everything and, just by like the skin of my teeth, I pull it off and win, those are always the most salient to me. Not the ones where I go in, and if I just win by like 50 kilos or 100 kilos or whatever, then I'm just like, well, those meets, the goal's a little different probably. If I'm winning by that much, it's probably just to put up mega totals. But, at a meet like nationals, where it may not necessarily be about the mega total. I mean, depending on how often you compete, I compete relatively often. You put up enough meets, some of them will be good, some will be bad,
Mm-hmm.
But no, like, I crave like that competitiveness. That is the common denominator over the past few years that has forced me to be better and to become better. And if I stayed 93 and didn't move up to 105, I don't think that I would be, body weight or mass, whatever aside, I don't think that I would just be where I'm at now without the way that you pushed me and how Michael pushed me and how others pushed me. So I think for me personally, I really needed that. So, it matters, the competitiveness.
I'm interested in this idea of like humanizing your opponents. Like you're not just a set of lifters. Like, we've chatted, we've had great conversations. I've had conversations with Michael Davis, and then you step in a competition and it's totally different, and you're focusing yourself and winning and, like putting your best, and it can shift so quickly, but you're just like, you're a human who's training the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. And, you've got a job and you've got a whole life and stuff like that. And it's just like, none of that matters in the competition. And then all of a sudden it all matters again. And we're just two people talking to each other.
Yeah. I mean, it changes really quick. Meet day. This meet was a little different for me though. Usually, like I 100% agree. Like that's how it is. It's like, well, it's me or them. One of us are gonna win. So everything that's led up to this right now doesn't matter. It's about what happens in this moment. But But this year, I will say, was a little different for me. And we talked about this a little bit, but the world, so we all know that the world is not a predictable place. None of us are, naive here. But it's one thing to understand it, but it's another thing to have it smack you across the face and pull the rug from under your feet. And what I mean is, last year we didn't have a nationals, and that's due to, a lot of factors, namely the, COVID-19 pandemic. And, that was really like a reality check. I think we're all just like this is all, very contingent upon the world being an okay place, and the world is just not a predictable place. And in my, own profession, I see it all the time. The world is just not a predictable place, and things can be snatched from under your feet in seconds. So coming to this meet, there was, I think, a lot more anxiety and a lot more pressure to perform. And, like how the Olympics are spread out every 4 years, how you mentioned to me, Bryce, in that conversation, it really did feel like that. It's like, wow, it really is like this moment. The world has been through a lot in the past 2 years. And, we're trying to recover, but, who knows? Something else could happen. And worlds or nationals or whatever, next year could be gone. And I'm not saying that that's likely to happen, but we don't know. World's an unpredictable place, And so it just made that performance and just made performing for me there that much more, sort of like stressful. So what I tried to do that whole meet was go up to every single person in the back, and at least give them a smile, a handshake, a nod, just try to uplift others and, it helped me out to ease some of my anxiety, probably ease some anxiety of the other lifters. Some of them told me afterwards, but for me, this year was different because of all those things, Mm-hmm. I think everyone was a little more human than lifter for me this meet in particular, but otherwise, I pretty much share the same sentiment, Bryce, where they're lifters that meet, and it's either them or you.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, guys.
You sure? Because if you got something you want to go on, then go. Okay. Yeah. So I was reflecting as you both were talking on how who you are outside of being a competitor also influences how you view these things. And Omar, this is something you can probably relate to. Like, we both lift, we both, are serious about our training, but we're also voices in the community that, deserved or not, are listened to. And we have to think about how our, what our influence is. So I was reflecting on the fact that, Bryce, you're a coach and you're the head of TSA, and a lot of what you do stems from a sense of altruism and wanting to make the sport better from that perspective. And then Ashton, you were reflecting on how in your profession you see that uncertainty and how things can be taken out from under you. And I'd love to, for those who don't know, first off, thank you for your service, Ashton. Ashton is in the military. I believe you are an officer in the Army, if that's correct. Yes. Yep. So I would love to get an idea, if to whatever degree you're both comfortable sharing, as to how do you think your lives outside of being a lifter influence the decisions you make, how you interact with others, and the decision to even be on this podcast, I'm sure, and do things about that. Bryce, is something you've thought about. So yeah, just where that comes into the calculus as best as you can, assess. So it's all, of course, interrelated, but.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Everyone start at once, okay?
Canadian standoff there.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, I know that it would probably be good for business if I won. Not that it'd be, tremendously different either way, but maybe that's a low-lying factor or something like that. But I did kind of ask myself, where's this pressure coming from that I feel going into this competition? Well, a few things, and they all kind of have to do with personal history. It's winning the last few nationals and hoping to kind of keep that streak alive, in the same way that you have got a MyFitnessPal streak or something like that. There's some pressure to kind of keep going. And with nationals being the path back to world championships, I need this stepping stone to go on. So that's another bit of added pressure. But there's this more personal piece of wanting attention and validation from people, and winning potentially gets you more attention and validation. Oh, he's a good person because he wins. And I spent quite a bit of time thinking hey, it doesn't make me a bad person if I lose. As insane as it sounds to say that right now, there's always a little piece of you that thinks, oh, when I post big lifts, there's more likes, there's more comments. People are telling me good things that I want to hear. I want to do more of that because I want to hear those good things. And that's certainly an unconscious piece that I think a lot of people go through.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in bear terms, positive reinforcement is pretty powerful. Keeps driving you, keeps behavior, more consistent, and there is like that added pressure to win because, of course, you're going to continue to want that, like positive, like appraisal from others. And like it makes you feel like a certain way about yourself as well. So, I mean, yeah, of course that like makes a lot of sense. And then, it's like also just recognizing, like cognitive like distortions or whatever. It's like wherever they arise, like, like, oh, well, like if I don't win, like you said, like I'm not like a bad person for not winning, which is absolutely true. I mean, it's not like, oh, well, if I win, everything's, going to fall apart or people won't see me the same or they won't appreciate me the same, because at the end of the day, I mean, we win meets, we lose meets. But, the people that, at least I believe this from my own, perspective, the people that, really matter and that are, truly there for you, will be there for you whether you win or lose. And that definitely gives me a lot of comfort. I will say, like, from my own, short time so far, like training to become like an officer and like as like a graduate like student who like studies like clinical psychology, by the way, it's like, I don't know, like outside of, lifting, there's just like a whole other life and world, that I have there. And it's like, like sometimes I really deal like with people's lives, and it's just, it's incredibly powerful. I mean, this last year, actually, I was doing some practice at a like graduate school, you'll do like practicum, you'll train at different sites and stuff like that. I was training at a pediatric hospital in Baltimore, doing like neuropsychological assessments, and it's like neuropsych. Okay, it's neuropsych. It's straightforward. There's a test battery. You put it together depending on the case, and then this, that, and the other. But it's like that's what I originally like. That's what I'm getting into, but I just didn't realize how life-changing that experience was going to be, working with kids and, working with, people who have literally been through hell, in so many different ways and seeing how it affects them at such an early age and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, there's just like this whole other like world inside to me that powerlifting never really sees. But I mean, I don't know, like my whole perspective on like life and powerlifting after like training for the military and now like being in and doing graduate school has like just dramatically changed. And it honestly kind of makes me appreciate the fact that I can actually still go out and be healthy and have my sight, my hearing, my limbs, and still be able to lift weights and compete and enjoy competition, because there are a lot of people that just don't have those like luxuries of being able to get into a nice niche or sport or what have you because of just life circumstances that are just dramatically debilitating. You just become a lot more grateful for a lot more things. So like when nationals came around, that definitely added to that layer. All that to say that added to that layer of me just really being truly grateful to be there and to really maximize, my enjoyment out of it, the competitiveness and stuff like that. I was like, if I'm, I'm basically sitting there thinking, if I'm here, I might as well go the whole hog, not run away from the competition, who like has, a hell of a great chance to just totally beat me again, But yeah, I mean, yeah, my like whole worldview and just even like my view of powerlifting and how grateful I am to be able to compete and go to gym openings and stuff like that. It's just dramatically changed over the last few years, I would say. And what I do outside of powerlifting has been a huge part of that.
Mm. So it sounds like your life experiences and what you do outside of powerlifting has enabled you to appreciate powerlifting in more than just as a competitive pursuit. It sounds like it's giving you perspective on powerlifting of, wow, it's a privilege and an honor to be able to move and be healthy. And I love this. It's not just about, taking a medal.
Right. it's so much more than just, you know, a win or a loss. It's to be able to just, you know, see how, yeah, just all the things that you said. Pretty much. I mean, you eloquently put it. I shouldn't sit here and ramble and restate what you said, but yeah, exactly.
Hey, I was just reflecting on what you said, homie. So that was all you, brother. So I think that's really interesting because, you know, Omar, we've talked about this many ways, and I always steal my brother from another mother's phrase of diversifying your happiness portfolio from my good friend Alberto Nunez, which is something that we often focus on, and it's very important, especially more commonly, in my opinion, in physique competitors who tend to get, you know, very obsessive on what they do and then put themselves through maybe a little more trauma than most other sports. And is to find some, we're stupid and we're crazy. So we need that, the necessity of trying to find more to value in what you do, I think is important. And Bryce, this is something that we've talked about, and not in my prompting either. This is something I think I 100% agree, and I love that you do it. But you've gone into your last couple of meets with like a laundry list of things that you could view as successes. And I think that probably plays into this, because then it's not just being competitive, right?
Yeah, it certainly helps kind of give you more avenues to like feel like you did a good job in different ways. So like winning isn't the only way that like you can achieve success. I had you have all-time PRs that you can chase. I had a 2,000 pound total that I finally wanted to hit in competition. I had an 800 pound deadlift that I hit in competition. And so, you know, these kind of things give you more ways to experience success. And I encourage all the athletes I work with to do the same. Like, you know, we've got PRs, but, you know, it's a first meet, you know, let's get your feet wet. Let's meet a few people. Oh, it's your third meet. You know, we've got some qualifications. We have some, you know, technique stuff. We have some numbers based stuff. Just kind of like, let's take this idea of goals and let's just spread it out. So you have a lot of different ways you can feel like you have success. And truly that has helped me this time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And, you know, yeah, I mean, yeah, just like the whole 2,000 pound total thing. I don't know why that was just like clicking in my head. I was like, yeah, like not only did he, you know, do that, he like by a lot, you know. But no, it's really good that you're able to take away like so many of the other, you know, very, and you know, in fairness, very objective, you know, markers of like success from like that meet as well. I mean, like, you know, just totaling as much as you did. And like on a 7 for 9 day, you know, not even a 9 for 9 day. I mean, who knows what can happen, you know, when it's all together and it's all there on the day, you know. So there's a lot to look forward there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot to look forward to as well. Yeah.
I'm curious. You know, you kind of talked about this this perspective that you have being an athlete, where being an athlete isn't the only thing that you are, or maybe having these life experiences makes you appreciate your journey a little bit better. I've certainly seen people, Eric talked about it as well, people who don't have that, where, you know, they dive headlong into sport and sport consumes them, you know, whatever it is. You know, we've got the Olympics coming up in a few months. I'm sure for the Olympics, people dive headlong and prepare as if, you know, nothing else in life matters. And this dovetails into another thing, talking about like how to view competitors from before. You know, like we're talking about this fairly healthy way of viewing competitors as another person who's trying to beat you, but is also, you know, just putting their heart out there. You can be an athlete. It's kind of worthy adversary idea. But certainly we see examples where that's not the norm, where people shit talk or view their competitors as lesser than and stuff. And I'm just kind of curious what everyone's thoughts are. Like, are there kind of maladaptive ways of viewing your self-attachment to sport or other competitors?
That's very interesting. In the word maladaptive, you know, it's always fascinating to me, like, because, you know, in some circumstances like that, you know, as you put it, like, you know, kind of like degrading others or shit talking them, you know, like I could, you know, see like in situations, if we just go strictly by definition, how that could potentially be, you know, maladaptive for some lifters. But, you know, a lot of people, even if they're doing something that we may consider like outside looking in as maladaptive, they might consider as, you know, adaptive. And it's just fascinating to me, like for them, that might actually be something that's like, like helping them, or maybe even making them feel better about their own, ability or performances. Like me personally, I don't feel the need to shit talk others because I don't have anything to prove through that. Like, I'm not going to sit and go and just publicly, try to like slander or embarrass like my competition. I respect them too much. I want them to be at their best. I'm not trying to, throw out these lowball shots. Like I, just generally try to be a gentleman about it. But I've seen a lot of, the opposite as well, where, people will do that. And, I mean, different folks, different strokes, but it's not something that I, of course, personally agree with or would do. I think some people argue, oh, well, it's to hype things up, and it's to spice things up and to make everything more popular and stuff like that, and I'm like, like I'm not like a super popular guy or anything. Like I have a small, like I have a modest, following or whatever, and I've never had to like shit talk other people to acquire that. So I mean, I think there's more than one way to, gain garner like some, popularity, and rather than just sheer popularity, that's generated from shit talking, I would much rather have, like respect from others. So.
I got some thoughts on this. So I totally agree with you. And Ashton, you're actually much more authoritative on this as someone doing their PhD in psychology. But in my perception of this, there are very few behaviors which are purely maladaptive. Most of the time, they serve an emotional purpose. You could argue from a societal perspective, they may not serve you later in life, or they may have consequences. But most of the time, like even the self-destructive behaviors that are out there, they're often at least serving an immediate emotional need, which is why just simply saying, stop it, doesn't really work, So I think that's always interesting. So when I see someone like, I don't know, I know Omar will get these references, like a Michael Venom, like the way he just crazy shit talks constantly, like in the middle of a fight, incredibly disrespectful. He's like the bad guy, and is like literally dancing while someone's unconscious and when he punched them. I think like he's doing that for some reason. It obviously works for him. And then I think about, I don't know how sustainable that is. Like he's only lost once, and maybe if he's like, I remember thinking of like Roy Jones Jr. Not nearly to the same degree. So no disrespect to that level, but the first time he got knocked out, when he came back to fighting, he was just never the same, Or I think of Ronda Rousey is actually a good example of someone who was at the peak of UFC popularity, and also in her era was a very good fighter, make no mistake, with some fantastic arm bars. And then she had this fall from grace, losing twice and never recovered. And even if you look at interviews with her years later now, there's this almost like PTSD around it. And it goes way back. Like she talks about not winning gold in the Olympics when she was a young woman, still is traumatic for her. And it makes me think that whatever cognitive and emotional machinery and behaviors were getting her to be at a high level also came at the cost of, that's risky. Because obviously this was someone who, yes, whatever they were doing was helping them get to where they needed to be to compete at a high level. But the cost of losing was this almost seemingly permanent, or at least long-term psychological trauma that came from it. And the inability to then come back once that almost seemingly like self-constructed, but maybe not fully believed kind of ideal of who I think I am or who I want to be, which is allowing me to perform, but please don't burst my bubble or I'm never coming back from it. I think that is not always, but I think often what is going on in my head. And when I see people who are just all about the mouth game, and even when they are good athletes, I'm thinking like this person, when they lose, it's going to be they're going to hit every branch on the way down.
Someone's going to challenge them, and once that happens, what's next?
Yep.
And yeah, a lot of them do, just spiral downwards, and they lose their dominance in their like respective sport. It does happen a lot, and I've noticed it even in powerlifting. So, insane.
Yeah. And Omar, I actually want to get your take on this. We've talked about this, how I think because we've seen powerlifting blow up in the last 5 years, I think some people overvalue the potential reach and explosion that it can have. not to be a pessimist about it, but Omar and I are on the same page. You guys don't have to be, but when people are like, oh man, this is just the beginning, we're going to get like salaries, it's going to get huge. I'm like, pretty much everyone in the audience powerlifts. Like powerlifters everyone's a participant and a fan. And you talking shit on Instagram is probably not bringing that many more people to the sport. You're just giving the people who would be watching it anyway different opinions. So I don't know, Omar. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah. So I think it's difficult. I think you guys are in an unfortunate situation where you have the social media pressure of other athletic endeavors without the requisite financial compensation. So you have to deal with that external pressure or considerations of how people view you or the commentary, managing your own social media. Without the compensation, I do think, and this is a whole side tangent, I want to stay on topic because I think both Bryce and Ashton have said just some tremendous things in this episode. I think powerlifting popularity, it could maybe get a little bit more popular. I think looking at the trend lines, I think it may have peaked in terms of exposure to Gen Pop because I think over the last decade, there's been a rapid conversion of general lifters towards powerlifting. And if we look at that wellspring, that which it comes from, I think that has been kind of dried up. And so the amount of people entering versus the amount of people exiting versus 5 years ago, I think that's a little bit of a different story. I don't think that's necessary, however, for the long-term sustainability, enjoyment of said lifters. But I think some people where they're taking a look at the historical, growth of what has occurred, thinking like, well, this is just always going to happen. A few of the, rudimentary tests that you could do is like show Gen Pop or show people outside of lifting like, hey, this is powerlifting, such as, Eric, you got me excited, bro. You mentioned boxing, mentioned Ultimate Fighter as someone who likes, a lot of MMA. We show just an average person, like, hey, what's that? Oh, what's that? Oh, Ronda Rousey, she did armbar. What's going on here? Like, can I see it? Every single person I've tried to expose to powerlifting who doesn't lift, it's a hard sell. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a tough sell. Hey, what's going on? Okay, why are they lining up? But who? Okay, so who's competing against who? So they do their lifts. It's one lift? No, it's 3 lifts. Okay, how many? Oh, they get 3 attempts. Okay. And then they move on. Wait, this bench press, like, what's that? They got to bring it down? Like, what's going on there? But why is that guy having a wide leg stance versus a more narrow stance? There's a kind of the variability and volatility, I think, in sports creates excitement. I think that's why kind of like in strongman, strong woman, the competition where someone sees those same people that aren't really interested in lifting in general, this dude's picking up a log. Like, it somehow has some real world basis of comparison. Like, I can't pick up a log. Whereas, like, they see both you guys deadlift 800 pounds. It's like, that's 7 red plates. You know what I mean? Like, they're not, like, they can't think, and they have no idea of how truly heavy and monstrous 800 pounds is. So, anyways, that's a side tangent. But I think, man, what Ashton said, and then Eric, what you said too, when it comes to the psychological profile of athletes, maladaptive, adaptive, I do think we're talking about sustainability ultimately, where if you're not assured of your own personal perception of self, like your truth, and it's almost a hypothesis one must test every single competition. And once that bubble bursts, to your point, Eric, I can think of a lot of fighters that are never the same because they don't have it's that extreme need for the external validation that's not rooted in something. Their truth is not separated from the reality. It's tethered to what other people say, and they need that confirmation. And one of the things I love that Ashton said was wanting to go to the highest level of competition, man, because that actually shows me a security in the belief of yourself, right? Because you want to go up against the best, because you believe fundamentally you have something within you that whatever the competition is, you can rise to the occasion, rather than someone, once again, like where you're trying to gamify the system or other individuals. It happens in a variety of different ways, how people frame it. And then Bryce, to your point, man, the level of self-awareness to be thinking about these things, to write them down, to talk about them. I think these are things that on different levels in different ways, all lifters consider. And I could only think about the time, I'm going back to 2015, and I don't know if it was the exogenous hormones, man, or what's going on there. I've been at some high-level competitions untested, like, because that's kind of how I got into it, the people that were lifting in it, and let's just say the environment. I know this is a small microcosm, you two gents talking to one another, and I think this is a really unique situation where you're both highly competitive, like you're both right there, and you can have this intelligent conversation with one another. So I'm not trying to say this is how it happens all over the USAPL. Join tomorrow. But I will say, compared to 6 years ago, being at the world, like for world records and so forth, just the outright either hostility or insecurity, honestly, because there's so much.
You're talking about boss of bosses?
Yeah. I wasn't gonna, so no one in particular. I'll just say. But anyways, guys, there was a lot of tea in the air. and there's a lot of words exchanged, and there's a lot of what I would just say would be, Bryce, downright duplicity, man, because you're recognizing these emotions that I think a lot of people experience. And I saw people say things with their mouth, lie through their teeth, and their eyes reveal the Chico, the eyes never lie, right? They revealed a different thing where they're just like blood coming out of their eyes, and they say like, hey, I wish you the best of luck, right? Like just all this crazy shit. Like I won't even repeat some of the stuff I heard that I do feel fortunate, but man, what a different environment, and just participating, being able to be a fly on the wall. It's amazing. I just want to end with one thing before I give it over to you guys, and that is speaking about a high level of competitiveness, but with an assured belief in yourself. One of my favorite quotes from the entire USAPL 2021 prep or afterwards was actually said by Taylor Atwood. We're speaking to both of you guys, where you have your truths of like how you view yourself, so your personal perception. Then there's the external perception. So that's everyone on social media, coaches, doesn't matter, your competitors. And what is reality, right? Reality becomes the moment that we all experience together. So it's a hypothetical situation, and your belief in your truth being the reality could be the thing that pushes you forward. And one of the just stone cold, my God, I love it moments is Taylor said it before the competition, then he reaffirmed it after. And he said, because there were rumors and murmurings, once again, just like you guys experienced in his weight class, that there were potential usurpers to the throne. There were people that, oh, like Taylor, yeah, he's had a good run, but, you know, whatever. ABC is going to come and overtake him. And he just dropped a low-key hint on his IG, and he said, you think you're close, but you have no idea. Like, that's all he said. He's not someone to externally shit talk. And everyone's like, yeah, like whatever, that's Taylor, good hair Taylor, right? I'm his manager for his Head and Shoulders. I'm like, hey man, I believe in you. And then he's like, when I say we all witnessed it, right? We witnessed history where he smoked the competition, and he just says it very coolly. Once again, his belief in his reality, reaffirming it. You think you're close, but you truly have no idea. Man, mic drop moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, one of the classes in particular where I saw a lot of that, shit talking in the past. And, sometimes there's an old saying where I come from, sometimes your mouth writes checks that your ass can't cash, and sometimes your ass has to pay. And
but
it's
imagine.
just,
Oh, sorry.
no. But it's just fascinating. I mean, with that meet, and just watching, Taylor's sort of, tenacity in his own training. And I just knew that something was coming, and I knew I had to be there that day to watch what was going to happen with the 74s and, the 83s as well. And, wow. I mean, and no disrespect to the other, like, 74 lifters, but it wasn't even close. Like, straight up, like, no. Nope. So, yeah, I mean, I agree, man. He really stuck by his word there, and didn't have to, shit talk or slander, but said something very subtle, just a little cryptic, but enough to get the message across, and got to say it again afterwards. So
it makes me think how powerlifting is. It's interesting. So we there's a lot of good powerlifters right now who have a sporting background from sports where you go head to head, literally, with other competitors. There's a lot of people who used to play football who are now in it, and they have a different, but sometimes I wonder how necessary that perspective is, that being hyper competitive and how you view your competitors. It's easy for me to say this as someone who is really just competing with myself, but that's most of the powerlifting proletariat. Let's be honest. Like, most of us are not in a position where we are vying to be the top dog in our weight class. Even I mean, you can really kind of feel like, all right, I'm trying to go for the number one bench in the Auckland region, and now all of a sudden I can artificially create it. But it's not necessary. Honestly, for me and most lifters, it comes down to it's me versus me, and progress is the goal. And when it really comes down to it, for 99% of your training, arguably maybe not until your last 2 deadlifts in competition, that's all one needs to focus on. And sometimes I wonder, like, is this drive needed? And I think that's maybe not the right question, because what I'm hearing from you, Ashton, maybe you to some degree, Bryce, is that you feel that competitiveness facilitates better performance. Like, you move to the 105s and you're a better lifter because you put yourself in a more challenging position, challenged position, I should say. And that's that's how you view a part of the recipe to your progress and why you've been able to advance your total more in later years. So I think that's interesting. But I wonder if for people who struggle with the dual nature of this being facilitative or debilitative to performance, whether maybe they have beliefs about how an athlete needs to be that are just wholly unnecessary to powerlifting. Like, I was talking about UFC fighters. Like, oh my God, you can't avoid it. You're literally fighting each other. It's a combat sport. They are actually your enemy. You're trying to injure them. And at the pregame, like, like the weigh-ins, you guys are supposed to be touching your noses, and like, you're encouraged to talk shit. And there's money, a huge amount of money on the line to hype it up. It's almost impossible to not kind of bring some of that energy to a sport like that. But it is arguably wholly unnecessary in powerlifting, except for maybe 2 lifts every year,
Yeah. Eric, to your point, like, I can imagine a perfectly acceptable way of like being a competitor where you don't know a single thing about any of your competitors, where you go out, you do your lifts and you put on a blindfold, and that's the way it is. But like, essentially, like, the story of who you're competing against, what they're doing, is an optional story that you can choose to engage with or choose not to.
Absolutely. So I guess the question I want to ask you two gentlemen is how does one know whether they will benefit from watching that story and telling some of its tales?
I think you can get a few glimpses at that kind of thing when you watch sports movies. Are you competitive in other areas of your life? Like, are you racing to finish the dishes? Are you, like, do you have a sibling and you're trying to be better at them than everything? Like, does that fuel you up, or does that detract from your ability to be a good dishwasher?
Classic dishwashing Olympics. Similarly
to Bryce's point, I think the best way to find out is to figure it out. To actually, kind of observe, like, think about your past behavior, see how it's worked for you, and think about, trying different things, maybe even or being open to exploring that. Like, if I have found, that, like, I moved up a weight class, but honestly, I'm just, it's really competitive and it's cool, but I'm just too damn anxious to compete and put up a total, and I puke at myself and I go 0 for 9, then, I probably wouldn't do that again. But no, I mean, I found, for me personally, that it was just the total opposite. So I'm like, yeah, this is like the ticket for me. And it's been working, and, punching the right buttons. And what works for me, I recognize will not work for everyone else. And I don't think everyone should try to emulate me or try to do what I do. I don't think everyone should try to emulate Bryce or any other top level lifter. Different folks, different strokes. I mean, different things work for different people. And it's, based on all the things that we talked about already, and, their belief in their own abilities, how, their perception of others influences, them, and, their own perception of their ability, and, just all those things generally. But I think the best way, bottom line, is like to kind of, think about past behavior, observe current behavior, and be open to and think about, testing and exploring, options.
Well said. Bryce, anything else you want to add, my friend?
I think for me, at least, kind of getting through and processing some of this stuff is really helpful. And I always kind of walk away with this idea that if I can't be truthful with myself, then I can't be truthful with anyone. And so understanding like my own motivations has been, kind of key to being able to understand some of this stuff. And I encourage anyone to just, dig in a little bit and ask yourself, like, damn, why does that make me feel like that? And, just ask another few questions, and you might get something really nice.
I love it. Well, I think we covered a lot of angles. There was, true powerlifting fans are going to love this episode. I mean, it is not every day you get the proverbial look behind the curtain with the two best 105s in at least on this side of the fence, the non-boss of bosses world, if you will. Having a chat like this, I think, is something that is really just a privilege to be here. So I want to thank you both. And I want to finally to open the floor to Bryce, Ashton, and also you as well, Omar. I recognize that I've been kind of in the driver's seat a little bit on this episode, but I want to make sure that if there's anything else that we want to discuss before we close this out, that you guys all have the space to do that.
Well, I think first and foremost, I'd like to say that I'm very appreciative of the opportunity, like this kind of opportunity, you know, to sit with like, you know, one of my most, you know, vigorous like competitors, and actually to be able to get more of a personal look into, you know, like the thoughts leading up to the meet, what goes into training and things like that. Because, you know, we all, you know, disclose, you know, only so much on social media. Some disclose more than others. And I feel like Bryce and I, you know, there's a fair deal of, you know, thoughts and things that we don't necessarily maybe disclose on social media. And so it's actually good to be able to sit, you know, I mean, albeit virtually, but face to face, you know, and actually be able to kind of, you know, talk about some of these things. For me, it's very meaningful, and I respect that, you know, you're able to come on and you know, share all those things with me. So I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm normally like a pretty kind of put everything out there kind of thing, and like headed into nationals, you kind of keep a bunch of cards close to your chest, and it just felt like such a relief afterwards to be like, Ashton, I've had all these thoughts, like help me process this, and you actually did. And you know, it's nice to kind of come out the other side like that. It just felt like a big breath of fresh air. And I hope listeners benefit from something like this, even if they're not at the same level of competitiveness. Thoughts about competitiveness are fairly ubiquitous.
Absolutely.
No, that's well said, Bryce. And let me just say, and I think I speak for both Omar and myself, that it is a true honor and privilege to have you both on, not just because you're both incredible lifters, but because you graced us with the willingness to be open, vulnerable, and talk about something that maybe isn't taboo, but it is potentially uncomfortable to talk about, but shouldn't be, in my opinion. And I think you guys have done something that is truly beneficial to the listeners. And it's just truly an honor to be able to host that and create that space. So thank you both tremendously from the bottom of my heart. I mean that in all seriousness.
It was a pleasure.
Eric, I'm going to say it's one of our best Iron Culture episodes. Yeah, I don't have to treat them all equally. We can play favorites around here. The level of insight, like Ashton, man, for real, getting to know you more, you talking about these things, giving a little bit about your background, but thought process, because I've known Bryce for several years. I know how eloquent he could be, and also his level of awareness. Man, just at this level, the ability to reflect, share, and then also say things, quite frankly, that I don't think this applies just to powerlifters. I think we can all agree on this. I think you two are very competitive at a high level in a sport. But I also think there's a certain transference in a lot of aspects of this conversation to just other areas of everyone's life. So even if you're like myself and Eric, let's call it recreational lifters, lifelong lifters, right? There's always something for everyone. So I think it's just wonderful, man. I'm going to make sure to include your social media in the description on YouTube. Everyone can go ahead and leave comments. We'll do, our best to respond. You can leave a rating and review on iTunes. Really reflect, however, before you do that, what you think personally, not that we deserve, but what everyone else should hear that we deserve. And it's right here. And lastly, I would be remiss, Bryce, if I didn't say this out loud, because this is honestly what went through my head when you said it. My man always just opening up where you said you're lifting. I'm lifting thinking about Ashton. Is he thinking about me? Or are we just in different states thinking about each other? That's like a paraphrasing what you said. It's beautiful. I mean, it's genuinely truthful. I had like a Wong Kar-wai Chungking Express, like just a flittering of imagery, of songs, of ideas, like the Cranberry songs, dreams going through. It was just wonderful to be a fly on the wall, honestly, to this conversation. So I thank you guys for talking about this. And in all seriousness, compared to, I think, the state of powerlifting and being voices in the sport compared to even just 6 years ago, and I joke about it being untested, but just what you guys are doing both online, competing in them with each other, it's just a wonderful thing to behold. So we'll see everyone in that next episode every single Monday. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you then.